will have more money to spend and more of a chance of getting a quarterback next year. They're going to look for opportunities. Could be a trade-up opportunity even for the Eagles potentially, if that's it. Could also be the Saints doing that. Number 2, Jamison Williams, Alabama, probably would be number 1 if we weren't talking about an ACL tear and not having this guy probably in training camp and in the first part of the year. Great all-around receiver, can do all the things.
It's the biggest, most important draft in the history of this Philadelphia football franchise. The JAKIB Media Sports 2022 NFL Draft Special. Live on 6abc.com from the Ocean Casino and Resort in Atlantic City. Presented by First Trust Bank, the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. IBEW Local 98, Stateside Vodka, United Healthcare, Mesa Law, 6ABC, and Budweiser, the official beer of the Philly sports fan.
Got the Mac and Mac guys here on Birds 365 on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. Despite the fact that he might be the only guest we've ever had on who has a better beard than me, we still invited him back for another appearance because he brings knowledge every time he does. Come on with us, Mike Tanier from FootballOutsiders.com. Hops aboard. How are you, Mike?
I'm doing well. These gray beards represent decades of Eagles first-round draft busts.
Yes. But that's because Jeffrey's not involved that often, Mike. Just one first-round pick, and that was Lane Johnson. Then Russell Wilson, third-rounder. Jordan Mailata, seventh-rounder, but he doesn't get involved. That brings me, since I know you're a big fan of silly season, what's your favorite story during the silly season of this ridiculous hype lead up to the NFL draft?
I guess it's the one that's breaking in the last couple of days that Trayvon Walker went from the late first round sleeper to a guy maybe who should go to the top 10 to minus 225 odds to be the first overall pick, as this guy who, when I was watching Georgia Bulldogs games on Saturdays, and then when I was watching Georgia Bulldogs film leading up to the Senior Bowl, he's like the 5th best guy on the Georgia defense. Is now the number 1 player in the NFL draft.
It's about projection, Mike. Come on.
He's got such long arms, and I can't get around this. And I see people kind of, look at his traits. Look at his traits. And again, we're old Philadelphia guys. We remember Mike McMullen. I don't want to hear about traits at the very, very top of the first round. Talk to me about that at the top of the second round or the bottom of the first round.
Fair enough. And I do want to ask, I got to question you a little bit here. Did you really do a show with Michael Kay? Why would you do it? Why? Kay's a friend of the show too, so we can poke fun at him since we're all poking fun at each other. How'd that go yesterday?
It was phenomenal. It was great having Michael on. And Mike's going to be there. I guess you guys are going to be there too in the Eagles auditorium watching all the action tomorrow night. So I'm jealous you guys all get to hang out. I'll be here in the home office doing pick-by-pick stuff, but it went phenomenal.
There's nothing to be jealous about, unless they open the cafeteria, which I don't have confirmation that's going to happen yet, Mike. But I'll be there. Jody will be on the air, CBS national radio. But so I'll get to see Mike Kay. That's always exciting for me. But more exciting for the listeners is probably the top of the draft. And you mentioned Trayvon Walker. I because you cover the league from a national perspective. I like Doug Peterson. I think he's a really good coach. But man, he's going to a bad organization. What do they think about the Jacksonville Jaguars? Have you ever seen anything like it?
It's bizarre. And the way the stories are coming out is that Doug would like one of the linemen, Ekamakwanu or Ken O'Neill. It's like, can't this lineman protect Trevor Lawrence? And they were like, no, we franchised Cam Robinson, who's an okay left tackle, but we franchised him. We spent money on him, so now we have to do something else. And that Shad Khan and maybe Tony Khan and the ownership family has their guy, but Trent Baalke is the one make the decision, as the general manager should. But the general manager should make the decision with the input of people like the coach or the guy who has the checks. Baalke don't do that. That's not how Baalke rolls. Him and Harbaugh had the battles, et cetera, et cetera. And Doug Peterson was hired specifically to sort of be the adult in the room after Urban Meyer. Like, his number one thing coming in is he's going to restore some calm and peace to like the chaos where Meyer was kicking guys, and screaming at them, et cetera. if he's there to do that, let him make those kind of decisions. Hey, the smart thing to do at number one is either get one of these tackles or get one of the edges that we know can get a dozen sacks and not swing for the fences. Jaguars just are not wired to think that way. They're going to try and swing for the fences.
Mike, I want to touch on a couple other teams, not the Jaguars, who'll be drafting in front of the Eagles. As of right now, Eagles sit at number 15, could trade up. Let's take a divisional peek. Good news is the Eagles made the playoffs last year. Bad news is both the Giants and the Commanders now draft ahead of the Eagles. Giants with 2 first-round picks at 5 and 7. The Commanders at 11, couple slots ahead of the Eagles. Giants, new general manager, new coach in place. Yes. Washington trying to stay in the course. Mm-hmm. What kind of position are those teams in to improve themselves here? Do you have confidence?
Giants need everything, pretty much everything in the world. They may trade down, they may trade out into 2022 because their cap situation is so bad that 2 first-round salaries could actually hurt them at this point. So, I mean, they're going to take an offensive lineman and an edge rusher probably, or an offensive lineman and a Sauce Gardner if they stay where they are, or a Derek Stingley. Okay. If that new brain trust has their druthers, they're going to kind of push and say, we'll have more money to spend and more of a chance of getting a quarterback next year. They're going to look for opportunities. Could be a trade-up opportunity even for the Eagles potentially, if that's it. Could also be the Saints doing that. Washington, I don't know. I don't know. They were one of the most injured teams in the league on offense last year, so we don't know what they believe they have. Looking at them, it looks like they might need a safety. If Kyle Hamilton actually slips because people think, oh, he's the best player in college football, but, who needs a safety? That could be a place where the Washington Commanders could pick up a value. They could be looking for a receiver ahead of the Eagles, and that would be a problem since the Eagles are in the receiver market. But they've got, obviously, Terry McLaurin, but they're getting Curtis Samuel back, but they might say we need somebody else there. So Giants might trade out, might just work on the line. Commanders, it's very hard to say. My guess is that they're going to go on defense, but they could try to upgrade that offense as well.
Well, you mentioned the Eagles trading up, and I think there's 2 ways that could happen. The targeted trade up, which they've done in the past, most recently last year with Devontae Smith. Andre Dillard was that, Fletcher Cox back in the day. Yeah. Small move up, which I think is most likely. But you mentioned the splash, the Giants, Carolina, a lot of teams looking to get out probably of that top 10. If the Eagles weren't going to make that splash move, which I don't agree with, they have too many needs, but what player do you think they would target if they're going to try to go up that high?
One could be Williams, wide receiver from Alabama. I don't like that move because you're not getting immediate help because of his ACL injury, but around the league, he's coveted as somebody who can be a long-term answer. And it'll be an Alabama, class reunion, whatever. He's a very, very good player. If either of the cornerbacks, Stingley or Sauce, drop, which is very unlikely that they're sitting on the board around 9 or 10, and that team sitting there and say, well, screw it, we're just going to get this guy. That could be a guy that you're getting up to get. Another guy I'm just looking at, and, talking to Kay yesterday, Jordan Davis, Georgia defensive tackle, 320-pound, monster, has, Vita Vea potential, is a guy that could start dropping towards the Eagles. And you got Fletcher Cox, Jevin Harger. You got Fletcher Cox from last year of a deal, renegotiated deal. You have needs all along that defensive front. This is a guy who comes in, eradicates all your problems on run defense, and will upgrade your pass rush a little bit because he's going to give you more, what Fletcher gave you more of 4 or 5 years ago on the inside. Could be a dark horse guy who he's getting down to that level, like where the Texans are picking or something like that, and the Eagles see something that they like there, and they go up and make that move.
Mike, you guys at Football Outsiders lean on analytics. I appreciate you because you're not a slave to analytics like some people are, but you incorporate it in your writing and the site's writing and evaluations and the like. I think this is one of the toughest times of the year because if you're crunching numbers from college football, how do they compare to projecting what a guy can get done at an NFL level? It's not apples to apples. It's kind of apples to oranges. Absolutely. More or less analytical use when you're trying to project a guy graduating from college football to the NFL for you.
So tricky. There are some things that you can look at and say, yeah, this will project. A quarterback who gets sacked a lot in college, that's the biggest sign that they're not NFL ready. So you can look at the college sack rates and say, Malik Willis, for example, led the NCAA in college sack rate. Against a mostly softer schedule. I mean, he was a weaker team, softer schedule, whatever. That's one of your indicators. If you need any others, if you draft him, he's a projection. Something like defensive end, edge rusher, sack specialist. the traits are actually a better indicator than the sack totals. And that goes back to Trayvon Walker. Those traits really are great. The analytics say he could be a very, very good pass rusher because 3-cone drills and 10-yard short shuttles and arm lengths and things like that are better than saying, oh, he had 12 sacks, so he had 13 sacks. So that becomes very tricky. The problem with Walker is the analytics love him, and they love Thibodeau, and they love Hutchinson, and they love one or two other guys. So if it's all equal, if it's all within like 1 percentage point each other, take the guy who had a dozen sacks, not the guy who only had 6 sacks, and that makes the most sense. So a lot of times along the way, you have to throw out 90% of what you're looking at because these guys are running RPOs and read options and screen passes over and over again in college. It inflates their stats. They're playing against weaker opponents and all those things. You have to grind all of it out and take a couple of indicators and say, this is what we can hang our hats on.
And how much does the tape matter, especially when you go to a place like Georgia, which, most times, Mike, they're going to have 7 defenders maybe in the top 60 or 70 players in this draft.
Yeah.
Most times you're not getting 7 players drafted in a particular year. This is rare. And, somebody brought up, one GM brought up to me that the transfer portal is a big deal in college now for this reason. And Georgia already lost Jermaine Johnson.
Yes.
Jermaine Johnson was at Georgia before he went to Florida State.
Right.
So they have Trayvon Walker. They have Jordan Davis. They have Devontae Wyatt. They have another kid. Jalen Carter's going to go probably top 5 next year.
Yeah.
They got to play those guys or they're going to transfer and go somewhere else.
Right.
So you have this rotational system.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have a guy like Walker who's asked to set the edge.
Right.
He's not really told to go after the quarterback.
Right.
So how much does that factor into that projection and how difficult is it to marry the analytics with that kind of stuff when you're talking about the film?
It's tricky, and that's when people started looking at Walker more carefully and looking at his role and things like that and saying, oh, wow, this is a guy that maybe in November we thought of as, he's a 3rd-round pick or something like that. And we started moving him up the board, and you recognize, oh, yeah, he's not on the field as much because they're rotating in 5-star up underclassmen, and they're giving opportunities to these other guys, and they're blitzing Dean, et cetera, et cetera. So on that end, you look at the scouting, and that's important. And again, you also realize he's facing Alabama offensive lineman. He's facing, top of the line SEC opponents. And then I'll go back to the stats. And it's like, okay, well, let's look at the Georgia line and see who had a high pressure rate, not just a sack total, because sometimes that's just the quarterback ran into you. Who had a high pressure rate? And then you look at Walker, and his pressure rate was like at 9%. And Jordan Davis's was at 12 or 13%. And Devontae Wyatt's was at 15, 16%. And Carter, the young man, he's playing on limited stats. It's 23%. And if you're the 4th best guy on your line, I get scheme, I get usage, I get things like that. But if you're, again, the jump from 4th best on your line to best player in the draft, it's just, there's nothing on tape. There's nothing on the stats that are going to justify things like that. It does give you that ammunition to say, hey, if Bill Belichick took Trayvon Walker, it would scare the hell out of me. And Belichick would have this exact plan. He's going to do this. And, he'd wind up with 6 sacks, but the guy behind him would get 16 sacks. And it would all be part of the plan. But for right now, for the Jaguars, you have to look and say, I don't know what scheme plan they have for this guy. And that's where the projection comes from.
Mike, want to ask you about valuation in the National Football League, that there are some positions that just aren't valued the same way they used to be. If you look at defense, certainly it's defensive line 1, cornerbacks 2, linebackers 3, safeties 4. Maybe you think safeties 3, linebackers 4. And when I say linebackers, I'm not talking edge 3-4 guys who get to the quarterback. I'm talking about guys who are playing the linebacker position. Where has the needle swung too far? That in your estimation, the league is overreacted and their devaluating of a position has actually hurt some teams, and those that haven't moved the needle that far are actually in better shape and will react that way in this upcoming draft?
It might be defensive interior tackle, and it might be safety. We talked about Jordan Davis, and the talk about him is like, well, he's kind of only a run defender. Well, first of all, he still needs to defend the run. And secondly, I don't think he's only a run defender. I don't think people are watching the film a little more closely there. But safety is the one I go back to where it's like, we're devaluing safeties. We're devaluing safeties. And then they sit there in the room. How are we going to stop Aaron Rodgers and how are we going to stop Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen? It's like, well, maybe if you invested more talent in deep safety, you would have a guy who would be able to erase your Tyreek Hills, not by covering him one-on-one, by covering him down the field and chasing those plays down. And in this draft, it's not just Kyle Hamilton. It's Jaquan Bursker. It's Jalen Petrie. Most of these guys now in college are not just standing back in cover two. That's not what they're doing now. They really are covering slot receivers. They are blitzing. They're these Swiss Army knife, queen on the chessboard type defenders. And the NFL is still looking at him and it's like, we'll see. We'll grab who we get in the second round. Like the guy who can, I think of Kyle Hamilton. This is the guy that's going to stop George Kittle. This is the guy who's going to stop Travis Kelce. This is the guy who's going to stop Deebo Samuel, because Deebo Samuel's a bigger receiver in the slot, and you can get Hamilton in there, and you can do that. Or you can say, we need a guy deep, and he's going to help us stop Tyreek Hill. That's a lot of roles. That's important roles in today's NFL. And the teams at the top of the draft board are saying, maybe we'll get the fourth best edge rusher instead. I don't think that's a very good strategy.
Not only that, Mike, and I'm going to give Ben Solak credit for this. I think he brought it up from the Ringer. He brought it up to me, and I said, that is true. And what he said was, teams are actually valuing safeties, but they're valuing veteran safeties. They're paying guys like Marcus Williams, who to me is a good, but he's not a great player.
Right.
And they're paying him big money, and they're not valuing the position in the draft, which is weird because you look at the wide receiver boom in the market there, and now they're saying, well, these guys are getting pushed up the board because we want cost-effective guys because we don't want to pay a wide receiver $20 million. Why do you want to pay an average safety $13 million or above average safety, and you got Kyle Hamilton sitting there? It doesn't make any sense. From the normal way the NFL does business, that position is a 180 from the way they normally do business. It's so strange to me.
It's strange. You can say, well, safety is a little bit of a veteran position because they've got to do more read and react and diagnosis back there. A lot of these young guys, by their second year, they're going to be pretty darn good at that. And they'll make up for it by being a step faster from those veterans. And the other thing you'll see is veteran of the year. So we just brought in a guy for a 1 year, 2 year contract. Then we'll get the next guy. Teams do a lot of that. It's expensive. You don't get continuity at the position. And are they getting results? I don't know. Every year there's a new passing record. So I don't know if these teams are getting a lot of results from the safety. One team that doesn't do that, by the way, is the Bills. They got Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde back there. They've kept continuity back there. And they've got probably the best safety tandem in the league. They're not just grabbing random veterans. They drafted Poyer. I think they got Hyde from the Packers. But they brought these guys in and they got stability there.
I might need you to do some wide receiver ranking for me. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to ask you to put aside what type of wide receiver a guy is, because we hear a lot about, he's a big catch radius, taller guy. He complements the shorter wide receiver you have, except for the fact that Nick Sirianni's on record saying, I want all my wide receivers to be able to play all the positions.
Right.
X, Y, slot. Doesn't matter. I want them all to be able to play all. So we shouldn't look at them in that vein. And if that's the case, rank the top wide receivers in order in this draft. Don't know when the Eagles are going to pick. Are they trading up? Are they trading back? But when they're on the board, if they had the chance to pick any of the wide receivers, how would you rate them?
Number 1, Garrett Wilson, Ohio State. I love his ability to both get deep and get open in his first couple steps off the line. A little bit of a work in progress as a route runner, but has the agility to be elite at that. Number 2, Jamison Williams, Alabama, probably would be number 1 if we weren't talking about an ACL tear and not having this guy probably in training camp and in the first part of the year. Great all-around receiver, can do all the things. Number 3, I was back and forth about Treylon Burks because of his slow 40 times. But you go back to the tape, I talked to some people, and it's like they didn't expect this guy to run a 4.4. He's very big. I think he's typecast as Deebo Samuel in the slot. If you watch him on tape going up the sidelines, getting deep passes, a poorly thrown deep pass, for example, that might have been underthrown. I'm not sure if an Eagles quarterback underthrows deep passes once in a while. He can go back and get him. He can body up the corner on that side, and then he can run the little slant over the middle. So I like him. Drake London's another of the bigger type. I don't want to get into the types, but Drake London is like that. I don't know what he runs. I'm not too worried about it. He's a smooth route runner. I think there's not much downside in this guy. He's going to be your big target, and he can do some deep stuff. Number 5, I'm going with Olave of Ohio State. I think he's a pure speed guy. I worry because I think he was the 3rd best receiver on Ohio State. They had that underclassman whose name eludes me right now, and you had Wilson. But he is a very smooth route runner, and he's got that depth. Then I'm going with Jahan Dotson out of Penn State. Again, I think he's typecast as a slot. He's a little bit undersized. I think he fits what the Eagles like. They like smaller, skinnier, Devontae Smith type guys who can do a lot of things. He's got the speed. And then there's a tier after that, and we could go on. I could go on and on and on, but I think we'll stop there.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure, Mike, you've heard the news, the shocking news that Jalen Reagor's on the market if you're interested. Yeah. It is kind of funny, but we're talking about there's a very good chance for the third consecutive year.
Yeah.
The Eagles are going to take a wide receiver at some point in the first round.
Yeah.
I see both sides of the fence. You got to admit a mistake. The old saying is, you got to admit it before you can fix it.
Right.
However, Nick Sirianni was brought in here, and one of the knocks on Doug Peterson when he left was developing players. And I looked at last year and I said, well, Jalen Reagor got worse, if anything. JJ Arcega-Whiteside, who has now moved to tight end, got worse. When does player development come into this? I think too many people say you draft a player and you get a good player or a bad player. Right. You got to develop these guys. And have the Eagles failed when it comes to – because we don't know the butterfly effect. If you don't have to take a wide receiver, you can have another player at another position of need. How much has player development hurt this organization?
I think at wide receiver in the last couple of years, it really hurt because I think Arcega-Whiteside is a failure of development, and I think Reagor is a failure of development. I did not like him as a first-round pick, frankly. I think he was a one-dimensional guy that the Eagles and some other teams got caught up in as a first-round guy. I wouldn't hold that against the Sirianni organization just yet because I think they got, especially in J-Jaw, they got sort of damaged goods coming in that they're trying to manage along the way. So how much of it was the outgoing coaching staff? I was not impressed by some of the later receiver coaches, et cetera, that Doug Peterson had in there. How much of it was the quarterback controversy in the past and the idea that past quarterbacks weren't necessarily helping some of these young receivers along by being accurate and playing within the offense and things? I think that had a little bit to do with it too. So right now with the wide receivers of the last 2 years, I think Reagor was a miss. I think Slim Reaper's a hit. I think that he's. I didn't see any.
I give Nick Saban credit for that, though. I mean, he showed up and he was ready. I remember Devontae Smith on the first day of practice, and I said, "Oh, this is different."
Yes, that's fair. Well, then Jamison Williams might show up ready too, by the same logic. Then I think it's a need, and I think for the Eagles to say, gosh, we don't develop receivers very well. We better not do this. If they didn't do that by grabbing a guy off of the free agent market, then it's a need and you fill it. And if that's your worry, then don't take Sky Moore, from Western Michigan. I don't know if he's coming in ready. Yeah. Take one of these because these guys are coming in from Ohio State and Alabama. They should be pretty ready. Go out and grab one of them.
All right, let me double down on the Ohio State. The guy you couldn't think of was Jackson Smith Nigba, who, oh, by the way, had more receiving yards than either Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave this past year. And he's going back. And, oh, by the way, Ohio State has another kid by the name of Harrison. Might recognize the name. Son thereof, Marvin. So they're going to have a big-time passing game.
Pretty good quarterback, too.
That's exactly where I'm going. C.J. Stroud looks like he's going to be ready to put up boxcar numbers next year. I like the kid's arm. I like the kid's makeup. You got two quarterbacks this year. No quarterbacks are going in the top 5, maybe none in the top 10. Right. You're going to have two guys right at the top of the draft next year in the Alabama quarterback and the Ohio State quarterback. Which one do you like? Is there one better than the other? If the Eagles need to be in that quarterback market, they've got 2 first-round draft picks now next year because they did their trade down with the Saints. How good is next year's quarterback class going to be at the top?
Right off the top, those guys look like a number 1 and a number 2, a worthy number 1 and a worthy number 2. I've not ranked them in order. I've not broken them down in any way. It's just, I'm watching them when I'm scouting Jamison Williams and John Mechie and Olave and Wilson. And it's like, yeah, they're coming. You got to watch their progress through next year. I don't see with that receiving core in those programs, I don't see a thing where like, oh, you know what? They fell off. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't have all the names in front of me. There's depth behind them. So if the Eagles strategy, and I think a lot of us think the Eagles strategy is, okay, last year was the Jalen Hurts audition, and he did well enough that this year's the callback. So you get the callback audition. We're trying to figure out who's going to play Batman or Superman. So you get the callback because we have like a couple of guys. They're ready. They have ammunition next year to get that other guy. The question will be, first of all, how well will the Eagles do? They're not going to probably be a bottom 5 team. I don't think the Saints are going to be a bottom 5 team, so they're going to have to package things and move up. Who else is going to be in that conversation? Who else is going to have extra capital next year? The Dolphins, I think, put themselves in that position already because they're doing the similar thing with Tua. One thing I think the Giants want to do, what they would love to do, is take like the top 10, the 10th pick, and like give us the 20th pick, and then give us your next year one, because we could finish in the top 5 and we could move up, and we're going to be done with Daniel Jones. Let's be frank, we know that's how that's going to go. So the Eagles position themselves well to be in that mix for those top 2 and whoever else falls. The question is, they're not going to be alone, and will they have done enough when 2023 comes around if Hurts doesn't develop?
Mike, I think you have a beat on that. Last one from me. I want you to put on, and before I get there, I want to tell everybody to read Mike at footballoutsiders.com. One of the best sites covering the NFL. He does a tremendous job. I want you to put on, you just gave a good explanation of the Eagles and their thought process of kicking one of the draft picks into the 2023 draft, right, about the quarterbacks and Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. I want you to take off your hat right now and put on your Mickey Loomis hat and tell me what the hell Mickey Loomis was thinking when he made that deal. And has, by the way, Mike, as you find your Mickey Loomis hat, by the way, with the trade, they still picked behind the Eagles both times. They picked 16 and 19, and the Eagles are at 15 and 18.
Right.
What explain to me, like I'm a 5-year-old, what the heck Mickey Loomis was thinking?
I've got my Let the Good Times Roll Bourbon Street hat, the closest thing I got.
Very nice.
I mean, that's what I looked at, because I first thought, I was like, oh, they're moving ahead of the Eagles. They want to be in position to draft a Jamison Williams. Like, you did not move ahead of the Eagles. You moved ahead of the Chargers, who ain't taking a quarterback, ain't taking a receiver, probably. They're taking a lineman. So a lot of us think they're looking for a left tackle solution. We didn't get far enough for the top left tackles. They're not going to be there for Cross, Neal, Ekwonu, probably not Penning. So what did you do there? So now the theory is they're going to move up again. Maybe for Kenny Pickett, maybe for Charles Cross or Trevor Penning. Maybe we don't know. Maybe they like Sauce Gardner, etc. The problem with that is they also have committed, I think, $280 million in cap money to next year already. Because all they're doing with all their veterans is pushing all their contracts into 2023, 2024. So they got out of cap hell this year by getting into cap hell next year. If they trade up again, so that'll be the first round pick from next year, the 2022 pick from 2024, and this year's 2 first-round picks for one guy, and then they're in cap hell next year, and they won't be able to get out of it next year because they played all their get-out-of-jail-free cards. They're not going to have anybody on their roster. I don't understand this. It's going to be Taysom Hill, and whoever they pick this year, that's going to be their entire roster in 2023, 2024 if they're not careful. So I don't understand it. Everybody I talked to was like it was a lopsided win for the Eagles. Last year when we talked about the deal with the Dolphins to get the first-round pick, it was like a lopsided deal for the Eagles. Eagles are good at that element of things. They may not be able to develop wide receivers. They may like whiff at times on the draft. They're good at getting these deals and getting themselves in position to either get some success or make the next mistake. And I think at this point the Saints were the victims of that.
All right, you're going to settle the debate between John and myself. We've disagreed on this a couple times during the past week. The trading of Deebo Samuel.
Yeah.
There's a lot of rumors banning about why Deebo wants out. Right. Is it because he doesn't like the way they use him? Has it just been about the contract? Is he just not a California guy? None of us know for sure. Yeah. But let's say he is not happy with the way that he's being used. Then he just wants to be a wide receiver doesn't want to be a slash player, just wants to be Devontae Adams in a new spot located somewhere else. John said if that's the case, he'd pass on him. Right. That you can't have a player dictating terms like that.
Right.
Generally, I'm with John and say, no, the coach makes those decisions. Right. But this is such a special and a supreme talent. And I don't think it's an outrageous request. If he had said, I only want you to throw me the ball 25 yards down the field, that'd be outrageous. I don't want to be something that no one else in the National Football League is. To me, is not outrageous. If that's what he needs and I can get him for the right price, both on contract and exchange of draft picks, I would do that and say, all right, you got it, Debo. Should you allow a player to dictate? There's a lot of empowerment going on in the NFL. This would be a new and different empowerment if you were a general manager and or a coach of another organization. Would you kowtow to Debo's wishes?
I don't mind a player dictating to a degree. First of all, you said the right price. There's not going to be the right price for Debo. They're going to gouge anybody who's looking for Debo. And the idea of don't use me as a running back anymore, I think that's fair. I think that's reasonable when you're going to your current employer. And when you go to your next employer and say, I want to be used a certain way, and you don't think that's going to impact your contract negotiation leverage and your trade value, I think that's ludicrous. You have to take me on my terms. You have to take me minus one of these things that made me a household name and special. Now pay me what I want and give the team what they want. I think that's really in the opposite direction of saying, let's accommodate this guy. And if I'm coming in as I'm Nick Sirianni and I brought this guy in and we handed him, $26 million a year over several years, and we traded away a first round pick for him, which was probably what it would take. And the moment I call a jet sweep, I'm worried about him looking at me side-eyed and taking the name Eagles off his Instagram. I think I made a huge mistake. So if that's the guy you want, I think the most sensible thing is for the 49ers to accommodate him on that end, because they can talk for real about their actual playbook and what the issues are. And then they can accommodate him financially without giving up draft picks. Everything else is just too high a risk. And I'd say, nah, I'll go find Treylon Burks, or I'd go into the draft and I'll get one of these other kids. There's like Wendell Robinson and these other guys who can be slash players, and I'll grab them and I'll get them on their rookie contract.
Mike, great stuff. We appreciate you coming on board. You had about 30 hours. You can do 4 or 5 more mocks between now and the draft. How many you plan on punching out?
4 or 5 more mocks and like 25 more podcasts, and then like 20 more on Friday and 20 more on Saturday and 50 more on Monday.
Yeah. The minute I hit send on the mock, Mike, I want to take it back and I want to change it. But I'm just closing the book.
For entertainment purposes only. That's what these things are about. It's all fanfic, It's not canon.
We have Mike Tanier on for more than just entertainment purposes. The beard scores the entertainment points. We bring him on for the.
I'm jealous of the beard. I can't grow that kind of beard. I'm jealous of that.
Sorry, I'm getting a trim in 2 hours, so I'm pretty excited.
Oh, very good. He's got to be looking proper for the NFL draft. Mike, good stuff. Thanks for hopping on, bud. We'll get you on after the draft comes down, get some evaluation after the fact. Thanks, buddy.
You got to take care. Enjoy the draft, guys.
Mike Tanier with his good time hat on here with us.
Good times roll. No good times for Mickey Loomis. He got ripped as well he should.
We shall see if he pays the price for it on draft night. Drafting behind, as John properly noted, the Eagles not once, but twice.
Twice. Yeah.
All right, coming back, we got to put a bow on the show. Counting down to the NFL draft here on Birds 360.